The red sand of Centauri Prime turned black under the alien boots. Bodies lay scattered across what used to be the planet's greatest city. Smoke rose from burning buildings that had stood for 1,000 years. In the center of it all, a massive figure walked through the destruction like death itself. Zarthok the Destroyer stood 8 feet tall. His black scales caught the light of the burning city. His amber eyes glowed as he looked at his work. Another world had fallen. Another species had learned to bow before the Galactic Empire. The reptilian warrior felt nothing as he stepped over the bodies of those who had tried to fight him. Behind him, soldiers cleared the rubble and counted the dead. They moved with the efficiency of an army that had done this many times before. Zarthok had led them to victory on over 200 worlds. Not once had they failed. Not once had they met a species that could stand against them.
"Oh, sir."
The planet is secure, reported Captain Crix, his second in command. The smaller alien's voice shook slightly. Even his own soldiers feared him. Zarthok nodded once. He did not need to speak. His reputation spoke for itself. Across the galaxy, entire civilizations surrendered when they heard his name. The smart ones gave up without a fight. The proud ones died fighting a battle they could never win. His personal communicator buzzed. Holographic image of Commander. Veltar appeared in the air before him. Commander's cold blue eyes studied the burning city behind Zarthok. "Excellent work, as always," Veltar said. His voice carried no emotion. To him, conquest was simply mathematics. Add up the numbers, subtract the resistance, and the result was always the same. "How long did it take?" 15 hours, Zarthok replied. His voice was deep and rough, like grinding stone. "Faster than expected." "Good." Veltar's image flickered as the transmission adjusted. "I have your next assignment." A new world has been discovered. The species calls itself human. Live on a planet called Earth. Zarthok's interest was mild. Another world, another species to crush. Another name to add to his list of conquered peoples. What do we know about them? It's very little. They are primitive. Their technology is centuries behind ours. They have barely begun to explore their own solar system. Initial scans suggest they have no unified government. They fight among themselves constantly. "Sounds easy," Zarthok said. "Too easy," Veltar agreed. "Which is why you will handle this personally. The Empire wants to make an example of this world. When other species see how quickly we conquered Earth, they will know that resistance is pointless." Zarthok felt a strange sensation in his chest. Something like unease, though he could not name it. He had felt this way only once before, during his first battle as a young warrior. But that made no sense. He was no longer young. He was no longer inexperienced. He was the Empire's greatest weapon.
"When do I leave?"
he asked. "Immediately. Your fleet is already prepared. I expect this to be over in 3 days. Maybe less." The hologram vanished. Zarthok stood alone among the ruins of another civilization. The smell of smoke and death filled his nostrils. This was his world. This was what he knew. Battle. Victory. The submission of the weak to the strong. So why did he feel like something was wrong? He pushed the feeling aside. Doubt was a luxury he could not afford. The Empire had made him into the perfect warrior. He existed to serve. He existed to conquer. Personal feelings were a weakness that his enemies could exploit. 3 hours later, Zarthok stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Devourer. The massive warship cut through space like a knife through flesh. Behind it, a fleet of 50 ships followed in perfect formation. Each ship carried enough firepower to level a city. Together, they could reduce a planet to ash. "How long to reach Earth?" Zarthok asked his navigation officer. 48 hours at current speed, sir." Zarthok nodded. He spent the journey reviewing the intelligence reports on humanity. What he read should have bored him. The humans were weak. They had no energy shields. Their weapons were chemical-based projectiles that could not penetrate even basic armor. Their fastest ships moved at a fraction of light speed. Yet the strange unease in his chest grew stronger with each report he read. There was something about these humans that bothered him. They were not just primitive, they were different. Other species the Empire had conquered had been peaceful or warlike, advanced, or primitive, united or divided. but they all followed patterns that Zarthok understood. The humans seemed to follow no pattern at all. They created beautiful art and terrible weapons. They saved the lives of strangers and killed their own kind. They reached for the stars while destroying their own world. They made no sense. "Sir, we have reached the Earth system, the navigation," officer reported. Zarthok looked out at the blue and green world that hung in the darkness of space. It looked peaceful from here, almost beautiful, but he knew that beauty was an illusion. Soon it would be another dead rock in his collection of conquered worlds. "Begin the orbital bombardment," he ordered. "Target their military installations first. I want them to know they cannot fight us." The first phase of the attack went exactly as planned. Human military bases vanished in bright flashes of light. Their primitive aircraft fell from the sky like burning insects. Their ships exploded before they could fire a single shot. But something went wrong during the second phase. Zarthok was leading a personal strike against a human military command center when a primitive missile struck his fighter. The weapon should have been harmless against his advanced shields. Instead, it tore through his defenses like they were made of paper. Alarms screamed in his cockpit. His ship spun out of control. The surface of Earth rushed up to meet him. For the first time in his life, Zarthok felt real fear. It's not fear of death, but fear of failure. What would the Empire think if their greatest warrior was killed by a primitive human weapon? The ship crashed into a field of green plants. Zarthok felt his bones crack as he was thrown against the cockpit walls. Pain shot through his body. Blood ran down his scaled face. But he was alive. He kicked open the cockpit door and stumbled out into the alien sunlight. The air smelled strange, sweet and clean, unlike the recycled atmosphere of his ship. Strange sounds filled his ears. Birds singing, wind moving through the plants, water flowing somewhere nearby. This was not what he had expected. This was not the world of a primitive species. This was something else entirely. Zarthok stood in the middle of the field, bleeding and alone. For the first time in his life, the galaxy's greatest warrior was lost. Jake Morrison was fixing the fence on his north pasture when he saw the streak of fire across the morning sky. The burning object crashed somewhere beyond the hill where he kept his cattle. The sound of the impact rolled across the valley like thunder. Most people would have called the police or run the other way. Jake grabbed his toolbox and first aid kit from his truck. Something had crashed on his land, and if there was a pilot inside, he would need help fast. He climbed over the hill and stopped dead in his tracks. The crashed ship was like nothing he had ever seen. It was black metal that seemed to absorb. Light, strange symbols covered its surface. Smoke poured from a crack in what looked like a cockpit. Jake approached carefully. The metal was hot to the touch, but not burning. He could hear movement inside. Someone was alive in there. The cockpit. Door exploded outward. Jake jumped back as a massive figure stumbled out into the sunlight. The creature was huge, at least 8 feet tall, covered in black scales that looked like armor. Its eyes glowed amber like a wolf in headlights. Blood ran down its face from a cut above one eye. Jake had seen enough wounded animals to recognize the signs. The creature was hurt, confused, and dangerous. But it was also in pain and needed help. The alien warrior looked around the field with those glowing eyes. When it saw Jake, its hand moved to what looked like a weapon on its belt. Jake slowly raised his hands to show he was not armed. "Easy there," Jake said in the same calm voice he used with spooked horses. "I'm not going to hurt you. You're bleeding pretty bad." Zarthok stared at the human male. He was smaller than most species Zarthok had encountered. Brown hair, weathered skin, clothes that looked like work gear. But what confused Zarthok was the lack of fear in the human's eyes. Every other species ran screaming when they saw him. This one just stood there with his hands up, speaking in a tone that sounded almost concerned. Jake took a slow step forward. The alien tensed but did not draw its weapon. Jake opened his first aid kit and held up a white bandage. "You've got a nasty cut there. Let me take a look at it." Zarthok did not understand the words, but he understood the gesture. Human wanted to help him. This made no sense. He was an invader. He had just been bombing this planet. Why would this creature want to help him? Jake moved closer. Up close, he could see that the alien was even more injured than he had thought. There were cuts on its arms and what looked like a broken rib. The creature swayed on its feet. "Come on, big guy. Let's get you somewhere safe before you fall over," Jake gestured toward his truck. Zarthak looked at the small vehicle, then back at the human. Every instinct told him to kill this witness and call for extraction. But something held him back. Maybe it was the head injury. Maybe it was exhaustion. Or maybe it was the strange kindness in the human's voice. Zarthak followed Jake to the truck. The human helped him into the passenger seat, even though the alien could have snapped his neck with one hand. Jake drove slowly across the field toward a cluster of buildings in the distance. "My farm's just ahead," Jake said, even though he knew the alien could not understand him. "Got a barn where you can rest up? My daughter's at school, so we won't be bothered?" 20 minutes later, Zarthak found himself sitting on a pile of hay in a human barn. Jake had cleaned the cut on his face and bandaged his other wounds. The human worked with gentle hands like he had done this many times before. "There you go," Jake said, stepping back to admire his work. "You should heal up fine. Whatever you're made of, it's tougher than anything I've seen." Zarthak watched Jake put away the medical supplies, as the human had just helped his enemy without asking for anything in return. In Zarthak's experience, conquered species either tried to kill him or begged for mercy. They did not offer first aid. Jake brought water in a metal bucket and set it down where Zarthak could reach it. He also brought what looked like food, though Zarthak was not sure if his system could process it. "I've got to go fix that fence," Jake said. "You rest up. If you need anything, just holler." Jake left the barn. Zarthak sat alone in the strange building, surrounded by the smell of hay and animals. Through a window, he could see Jake working in the distance, repairing the fence like nothing unusual had happened. Hours passed. Zarthak's communication implant slowly began adapting to the human language it had been hearing. The device was designed to learn new languages quickly, part of what made him such an effective conqueror. Late in the day, Zarthak heard a new voice outside the barn, high-pitched and excited. A young human appeared in the doorway. She was small, maybe 8 years old, with blonde hair and bright blue eyes. "Dad, there's a spaceman in our barn," Katie Morrison called over her shoulder. Jake's voice came from outside. "I know, honey. He's hurt, so we're helping him get better." Katie walked right up to Zarthak with no fear at all. She looked up at his massive form with pure curiosity. "Wow, you're really big," she said. "Are you from outer space?" Zarthak could not answer, but something in her voice made his chest feel strange. No creature had ever looked at him with wonder instead of terror. Katie reached into her backpack and pulled out a piece of paper. It was a drawing of what looked like a rocket ship, with stick figures inside. "I drew this at school today," she said, holding it up for him to see. "The teacher said aliens might be real. You an alien? What's your name?" Zarthak stared at the drawing. The child had made this picture of space travel before she even knew he existed. She had been thinking about creatures like him, and she was not afraid. Jake appeared in the doorway. "Katie, don't bother our guest. He needs to rest." "Not bothering him, Dad. I'm showing him my picture. I think he likes it." Katie climbed up onto a hay bale so she could be closer to Zarthak's eye level. She held out the drawing again. "You can keep it if you want. I'll make another one tomorrow." "Yes." Zarthak took the paper with one clawed finger. The child smiled at him like he was the most wonderful thing she had ever seen. That night, Jake brought food and water to the barn. Zarthak was beginning to understand more of the human language. "You feeling better?" Jake asked. "Better," Zarthak said. The word rough in his throat. Jake nodded like it was perfectly normal to have a conversation with an 8-foot alien in his barn. "Good. You can stay as long as you need to. Katie's already planning to show you her rock collection tomorrow." Jake started to leave, then turned back. "I don't know where you came from or why you're here," he said, "but everyone deserves help when they're hurt, even aliens from outer space." Zarthak watched the human walk back to his house. Through the windows, he could see Jake and Katie eating dinner together. The child was talking excitedly, probably about the alien in their barn. For the first time in his life, Zarthak wondered what it would be like to belong somewhere. To have someone care if he was hurt or hungry or alone. To be welcomed instead of feared. 3 days passed. Zarthok's wounds healed faster than Jake expected. The alien's body was built for war, designed to recover quickly from injury. But the warrior's mind was healing from something else entirely. Every morning, Jake brought food and water to the barn. He never asked questions about where Zarthok came from or why he was there. He just made sure his unexpected guest had what he needed. "You're looking stronger," Jake said on the 4th morning. "That cut on your face is almost gone." Nodded. His communication implant had learned enough English for basic conversation. "You help enemy," he said, the words still rough. "Why?" Jake paused while filling the water bucket. "Enemy. You haven't done anything to hurt me or Katie, as far as I can tell. You're just someone who had a bad day and crashed in my field. I come to conquer your world." Jake looked at him for a long moment, then he shrugged. "Well, you're not conquering. Much sitting in my barn eating oatmeal. Sometimes plans change." The simple acceptance in Jake's voice confused Zarthok more than anger would have. This human knew he was an invader, and he still brought him breakfast every morning. After Jake left for his daily work, Zarthok watched through the barn window. The human spent his day fixing things. Broken fence posts, a gate that would not close properly, a water pump that made strange noises. Jake worked steadily, never rushing, never giving up when something proved difficult. Katie arrived home from school in the afternoon. She had kept her promise about the rock collection. She spread dozens of stones across the hay in front of Zarthok, explaining each one with the enthusiasm only a child could manage. "This one's quartz. I found it by the creek. And this one's fool's gold, but it's still pretty. Dad says real gold is deeper underground, but I like this kind better because it's easier to find." Zarthok picked up a smooth gray stone. "What is this?" "That's from the river. The water makes them smooth like that. It takes a really long time, but the water never gives up. Dad says that's how you solve big problems, a little bit at a time. Every day until they're smooth." The child's words stirred something in Zarthok's mind. He had always solved problems with overwhelming force, crush the resistance, break the will to fight, when through superior strength. But Jake and Katie seemed to approach life differently. They worked steadily toward their goals, never giving up, but never destroying what was in their way. That evening, Jake invited Zarthok to eat dinner with them in the house. The alien had to duck under the doorways, and the furniture was too small for his massive frame, but Katie insisted he sit at the table with them. "We're having spaghetti," Katie announced. "It's my favorite." "Do you have spaghetti on your planet?" "No," Zarthok said. "Yeah. We have ... different food." "What kind of food?" Zarthok tried to think of how to explain nutrition paste and protein bars. To a child who had never known anything but home-cooked meals. "Not good food," he finally said. Katie looked horrified. "It's terrible. Dad, we should send some real food to his planet." Jake smiled. "I don't think we have enough spaghetti for a whole planet, honey." During dinner, Katie chattered about school, her friends, and her plans for the weekend. Jake listened with the patience of a man who genuinely enjoyed his daughter's company. Watching them together, Zarthok began to understand something he had never seen before. These humans cared for each other not because they had to, because they wanted to. After Katie went to bed, Jake and Zarthok sat on the porch. The night was clear, and stars filled the sky above them. Somewhere up there, Zarthok's fleet was waiting for his signal to begin the final assault on Earth. "Tell me about your wife," Zarthok said. He had seen pictures of a woman throughout the house, but she was not there. Jake was quiet for a long time. "Lisa died 2 years ago. Farming accident. Tractor rolled over on her while she was working the north field." His voice was steady, but Zarthok could hear the pain underneath. Katie was only 6. She didn't understand why Mom wasn't coming home. "How do you continue?" Zarthok asked. In his world, loss meant weakness. Warriors who lost their mates often threw themselves into hopeless battles rather than face life alone. "You just do," Jake said. "Katie needs me. The farm needs work. The animals need care. Life doesn't stop because you're hurting. You find a way to keep going." Zarthok studied the human's face in the starlight. "You are a warrior." Oh, Jake laughed. but not unkindly. I'm a farmer. About as far from a warrior as you can get. No, Zarthok said firmly. You fight every day. Not with weapons. With life. You lose, but you do not surrender. You're stronger than any warrior I know. The next day, Jake asked if Zarthok wanted to help with the farm work. The alien's massive strength made quick work of tasks that would have taken Jake hours. But more than that, Zarthok discovered something unexpected. There was satisfaction in building rather than destroying. Peace in creating rather than conquering. He helped Jake repair a section of barn roof that had been damaged in a recent storm. As they worked, Jake talked about his plans for the farm, new crops he wanted to try, improvements he hoped to make, the future he was building for his daughter. Why do you work so hard for something that might fail? Zarthok asked. Crops can die. Animals can get sick. Storms can destroy everything. Jake hammered another nail into place before answering. Because it might succeed. Because Katie deserves a good life. Because someone has to grow the food that feeds people. Because it's worth trying, even if it's hard. That afternoon, Katie taught Zarthok how to play catch with a baseball. Alien's coordination was designed for combat, not games, and he kept throwing the ball too hard or too high. But Katie was patient, showing him again and again how to control his strength. You're getting better, she said after he managed to throw the ball gently enough for her to catch. Want to see something cool? She ran to the house and came back. With a small device, it's a radio Dad gave me. We can listen to music from all over the world. She turned it on, and music filled the air. Zarthok had never heard anything like it. Not the martial songs of his people, but something that spoke of joy and sorrow and hope all mixed together. Katie began to dance, moving to the rhythm with the unconscious grace of childhood. She grabbed Zarthok's clawed hand and tried to get him to dance with her. The sight of the galaxy's most feared warrior being taught to dance by an 8-year-old girl would have shocked his enemies. But Zarthok found himself moving awkwardly to the music, following Katie's lead. That night, his communication device buzzed with an urgent message from Commander Veltar. Zarthok stared at the device for a long time before answering. Status report, Veltar's hologram demanded. You have been silent for 4 days. The fleet is ready for the final assault, but we need your coordinates. Zarthok looked through the barn window at the house where Jake and Katie lived. Light glowed in the kitchen where Jake was probably reading while Katie did her homework. Delayed, Zarthok said finally. Need more time to study enemy? Study them? Veltar's eyes narrowed. They are primitives. What is there to study? They are... different. Different how? Zarthok tried to find words to explain what he had learned. How do you tell a commander who sees only numbers that some things cannot be measured? How do you describe the strength that comes from love instead of fear? They do not surrender, he said finally. Then we will make them surrender. Then the coordinates Zarthok. The Empire grows impatient. The hologram vanished. Northak sat in the darkness, knowing that his next decision would determine the fate of billions. For the first time in his life, the galaxy's greatest warrior was not sure what victory really meant. The next morning brought dark clouds and the rumble of distant thunder. Zarthok watched Jake prepare for the day's work, moving with the same steady purpose as always. The human seemed to sense the storm coming but showed no fear of it. Looks like we're in for some weather, Jake said, checking the sky. Good thing we fixed that barn roof yesterday. Katie bounced into the kitchen, backpack ready for school. She had drawn another picture for Zarthok, this one showing him helping her father with farm work. In the drawing, all three of them were smiling. I told my teacher about you, Katie said proudly. She said aliens visiting Earth would be the most important thing that ever happened. Are you important? Zarthok looked at the innocent drawing in his massive hands. I do not know anymore. After Katie left for school, Zarthok helped Jake move the cattle to higher ground. The animals trusted Jake completely, following him without question. The farmer had earned their loyalty through daily care, not through force or fear. Storm's going to be a big one, Jake said, watching the clouds build. But the animals will be safe up here. Sometimes the best thing you can do is get out of the way and let nature do what it needs to do. As they worked, Zarthok's communication device buzzed constantly. Messages from Commander Veltar grew more demanding with each transmission. The fleet was positioned and ready. The Empire wanted results. By afternoon, the storm had arrived. Rain hammered the roof of the barn where Zarthok waited. Through the water-streaked window, he could see Jake checking on the animals, making sure they had shelter and food. The human worked in the driving rain without complaint. The communication device buzzed again. This time, it was not just a message. Commander Veltar's hologram appeared at full size, his cold blue eyes filled with anger. Enough delays, Veltar said. I am sending a retrieval team to your location. You will provide the coordinates for orbital bombardment, or I will find someone who will. You cannot remove me from my mission, Zarthok said, but his voice lacked conviction. I can, and I will. We want to send her up. I'm gonna enter inviting you in I don't get a run and your I under redubber I got my right I corrected by where I wish and ride a far then what got I okay without we got when we I went in the row what I we were just so what when so whatever spell these primitives have cast on UNs now, the Empire does not tolerate weakness. The hologram vanished. Zarthok knew he had perhaps an hour before the retrieval team arrived. He looked around the barn that had been his shelter for a week, the hay where he had slept, the pictures Katie had drawn for him. The bucket Jake refilled with fresh water every morning. This was the first place he had ever felt safe without feeling dangerous. Jake appeared in the doorway, shaking rain from his coat. You look troubled? Bad news from home? Zarthok struggled to find the words. My people come soon. They will want to hurt you. Jake's expression grew serious. How soon? Very soon. You should take Katie and run far away. This is my home, Jake said simply. I don't run from storms, and I don't run from trouble. Besides, where would we go that your people couldn't find us? Oh. Before Zarthok could answer, the sound of engines filled the air. Wow. Three Imperial dropships descended through the storm, their weapons already charging. They landed in the field where Zarthok's fighter had crashed a week ago. Stay in the house, Zarthok told Jake. Do not come out no matter what happens. What are you going to do? Zarthok looked at his weapons, still lying where he had set them down days ago. He had not touched them since Jake first bandaged his wounds. I do not know. The Imperial soldiers marched through the rain in perfect formation. Zarthok recognized Captain Crix leading them. Behind him came Commander Veltar. Himself, his uniform pristine despite the storm. Zarthok, Veltar called across the field. You will come with us now. Your mission here is over. Zarthok stepped out of the barn. The rain soaked through his scales, but he barely noticed. I have not completed my assessment of the enemy. Your assessment is irrelevant, we have decided. To proceed with full planetary bombardment. Every human city will be destroyed within the hour. The words hit Zarthok like a physical blow. Every city. That meant millions of humans would die. People like Jake who worked hard and cared for their families. Children like Katie who saw wonder in the world instead of fear. They are not our enemy, Zarthok said. Veltar's laugh was cold. They are not our friends. They are primitives who occupy a world the Empire needs. Their feelings are irrelevant. No, Zarthok said, and the word came out stronger than he had intended. They are not primitives. They are strong in ways we do not understand. Strong, Veltar gestured at the farmhouse. They live in wooden buildings. They travel in metal boxes with wheels. Cannot even control their own weather. How are they strong? Zarthok thought of Jake working in the rain to protect his animals, of Katie offering her drawings to a creature that could have killed her, of a family that opened their home to a stranger without asking for anything in return. They choose to be kind when they could choose to be cruel. They help when they could ignore. They build when they could destroy. That is strength. That is weakness, Veltar snapped. And you have become infected by it. Captain Crix, arrest him. The soldiers raised their weapons, but before they could fire, the farmhouse door opened. Jake walked out into the storm, moving with the same steady purpose he brought to everything. He did. Get back inside, Zarthok shouted. Jake ignored him. He walked straight toward the Imperial soldiers, his hands empty but his eyes determined. Captain Crix aimed his weapon at the approaching human. Stop there, primitive, Crix commanded. Jake kept walking. When he reached the soldiers, he stepped between them and Zarthok. The human looked up at Commander Veltar without fear. Not taking him, Jake said simply. Veltar stared at the human in disbelief. You would protect him. He came here to conquer your world. Maybe he did, Jake said. But he's been helping me fix my farm for a week. He's been kind to my daughter. He's been a good friend. I don't abandon friends. The words hit Zarthok harder than any weapon ever had. Friend, no one had ever called him that before. No one had ever stood between him and danger. No one had ever chosen to protect him when they could have saved themselves. Behind Jake, the farmhouse door opened again. Katie ran out into the rain, her small form quickly soaked by the storm. She threw her arms around Zarthok's leg, as if her tiny body could shield him from the Imperial soldiers. Don't hurt him, she cried. He's nice. He helped Dad with the roof. He likes my drawings. Veltar looked at the scene in disgust. This is what you choose? This pathetic display of primitive emotion. Zarthok looked down at Katie clinging to his leg, at Jake standing defiant in the face of weapons that could vaporize him, at two humans who had chosen to risk everything to protect someone who had once been their enemy. For the first time in his life, Zarthok understood what he was fighting for. Not conquest, not the Empire, not even survival. He was fighting for the right to choose love over fear, creation over destruction, hope over despair. He reached for his weapons. I choose them, Zarthok said, and his voice carried across the field like thunder. I choose to protect instead of destroy. One choose. To build instead of conquer? Then you choose to die, Veltar said, signaling his soldiers to open fire. Zarthok's hand found his weapon. But this time, he was not fighting to conquer. He was fighting to protect. And that made all the difference in the world. The galaxy's greatest warrior had finally found something worth fighting for. And he would not let them take it away. The battle was swift and brutal. Zarthok's weapons blazed in the storm as he faced his former comrades. Years of fighting together meant nothing now. He knew their tactics, their weaknesses, their patterns. More importantly, he was fighting for something they could never understand. Captain Crix fell first, his weapons spinning from dead hands into the mud. The other soldiers tried to surround Zarthok, but the warrior moved with purpose they had never seen before. This was not the cold efficiency of conquest. This was the desperate fury of protection. Behind him, Jake shielded Katie with his body. But neither of them ran. They stayed, showing faith in their alien friend, even as energy blasts lit up the stormy sky around them. Commander Veltar watched his soldiers fall with growing disbelief. Impossible, he breathed. You would betray everything for these primitives? Zarthok advanced through the rain, his weapon trained on his former commander. They are not primitives. You are. The Empire will destroy this world, Veltar snarled. With or without you, these humans will die. No, Zarthok said. They will not. He reached into his communication device and activated the emergency broadcast system. Every Imperial ship in the fleet would hear his next words. This is Zarthok the Destroyer, he began, his voice carrying across military channels. I have studied the humans extensively. They are not the primitives we believe them to be. Veltar lunged for the device, but Zarthok knocked him aside easily. The humans possess weapons we cannot understand, Zarthok continued. They call it hope. They call it love. They call it the willingness to sacrifice for others. These weapons make them stronger than any technology we possess. He paused, looking back at Jake and Katie watching from the porch. I have seen their strength. A male who works every day to build something better for his child. A child who shows kindness to creatures she has never seen before. They face loss. Without surrendering, they face fear without running. They face enemies by trying to make them friends. Across the galaxy, Imperial ships received the transmission. Commanders who had never questioned an order from Zarthok listened in shock. As their greatest warrior continued, "We came here to conquer Earth, but Earth has already conquered us. Hush. These humans have shown me that true strength is not in destroying your enemies. True strength is in making your enemies into friends." Eltar struggled to his feet, fury replacing disbelief. "You fool. The Empire will never accept this. They will send another fleet, a bigger fleet." Zarthok smiled, and it was the first time he had ever smiled in battle. "Let them come. The humans will be ready." He activated another frequency, one that reached every human communication system on Earth. Military bases, television stations, radio towers, internet networks. Every human device capable of receiving signals suddenly carried the same message. "People of Earth, this is Zarthok, of the Galactic Empire. You have been marked for conquest by forces beyond your world, but you have allies now. The Imperial Fleet carries information about our technology, our weaknesses, our battle plans. Use this knowledge, defend yourselves, show the galaxy what humans can do when they fight for their homes." The transmission ended. Veltar stared at Zarthok in horror. "You have given them everything. Ship designs, weapon specifications, tactical formations. You have doomed the Empire." "The Empire doomed itself," Zarthok replied. "It chose conquest over friendship, fear over hope. It forgot that the strongest civilizations are built on trust, not terror." Above them, the Imperial fleet received new orders. With their greatest warrior turned traitor and their plans exposed to the enemy, the invasion force began to withdraw. But Zarthok knew this was only the beginning. 3 months later, the first Galactic Council meeting took place in Geneva. Representatives from dozens of worlds that had suffered under Imperial rule gathered to plan their response. Earth had become the symbol of resistance. The planet where the Empire's greatest weapon had chosen love over war. Zarthok stood before the assembly, no longer wearing the black armor of an Imperial destroyer. Instead, he wore simple clothes that Katie had helped him pick out. She said they made him look friendly. "The Empire will return," he told the gathered representatives. "It will come with larger fleets and deadlier weapons. But they will face something they have never encountered before: unity. Worlds fighting together instead of falling alone." The rebellion spread faster than anyone expected. Planet after planet declared independence from Imperial rule. The story of the warrior who chose a human family over galactic conquest became legend across the stars. But Zarthok cared little for legends. He was more interested in smaller things, like teaching Katie how to throw a baseball properly, like helping Jake repaired the barn after the winter storms, like learning to cook human food that did not taste like nutrition paste. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Katie asked him about his old life. "Do you miss being famous?" she said. "Everyone in the galaxy used to know your name." Zarthok considered the question. Across the field, fireflies began to dance in the gathering dusk. Jake was inside, reading by lamplight, waiting for them to come in for dinner. "I am still famous," Zarthok said finally. "But now I am famous for protecting instead of destroying, right? For choosing family over empire. For learning that the strongest warriors are those who fight for love." Katie nodded seriously. "That's better than being scary famous." "Much better," Zarthok agreed. A year later, the war was over. The Galactic Empire had fallen, replaced by a confederation of free worlds working together. Earth had become the center of this new alliance, proof that different species could live in peace. Zarthok received many offers. Command positions in the new fleet, ambassadorships to distant worlds, honors and titles and rewards for his role in the revolution. He turned them all down. Instead, he stayed on the farm with Jake and Katie. He helped with the harvest each fall and the planting each spring. He learned to drive the old tractor, though his large size made it look like a toy. He attended Katie's school plays and helped with her homework. Neighbors had gotten used to seeing the 8-foot alien at the grocery store or the hardware store. Always polite, always helpful. Children who had once been afraid now waved at him. On the street, he had become part of the community in a way no conqueror ever could. On quiet evenings, when Katie was asleep and Jake was reading, Zarthok would sometimes step outside and look up at the stars. Somewhere out there, other species were learning to live together in peace. Other worlds were discovering that strength came from unity, not domination. It had all started here, on a small farm in Montana, with a man who chose to help a stranger, and a little girl who saw wonder instead of fear. The galaxy's greatest warrior had finally found his true purpose. Not as a destroyer of worlds, but as a protector of the innocent. Not as a servant of empire, but as a member of a family. And for the first time in his life, Zarthok was truly home,